The silver towers of the Galactic Confederation stretched into the purple sky of Zentara Prime, their surfaces gleaming with data streams that flowed like liquid light. Deep within the central archive, Archivist Veltar's 6 arms moved in perfect rhythm as he processed the quarterly surveillance reports from the outer sectors. His compound eyes scanned through thousands of worlds, most barely worth noting. Earth appeared on his screen for exactly 3 seconds. Sector 7G Minor. The same classification it had held for the past 50 years. Primitive world, pre-contact status, technological development stagnant. The blue and green planet's inhabitants were still fighting wars with chemical explosives and crude projectile weapons. Their most advanced spacecraft could barely reach their own moon. Veltar's attention moved on without pause. Why would the Confederation waste resources monitoring a world of primitives who couldn't even achieve basic faster-than-light communication? The report was filed automatically, joining thousands of others in the vast digital libraries that chronicled galactic civilization. 3,000 light-years away, Dr. Kim Gina sat in a control room that would have amazed the arrogant archivist. The facility stretched for kilometers beneath the Gobi Desert, its walls lined with technology that borrowed from a dozen different alien designs. Holographic displays showed real-time data from across the galaxy, information gathered by surveillance networks so sophisticated that even the Confederation's best sensors couldn't detect them. Gina's dark eyes reflected the soft blue glow of the tactical display as she tracked movement patterns in the distant Andromeda spiral arm. Her fingers moved across controls that responded to thought as much as touch, a human innovation that had improved upon Zentaran interface technology by 30%. Director Park, she called softly to the man studying star charts at the station beside her. The Hegemony fleets are moving again. 3 more systems have gone dark in the past week. Park Min-ho looked up from his analysis, his weathered face showing the strain of decades spent preparing for this moment. The Hegemony's expansion had been accelerating for months now, and their pattern was always the same: swift, brutal conquest followed by the systematic elimination of any species that couldn't serve their purposes. How long until they reached the outer rim territories? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Gina's fingers danced across her console, pulling up projection models that incorporated everything humanity had learned about hegemony tactics. 18 months, maybe less if they continue at their current pace. But according to all their intelligence reports, they still think we're up here throwing rocks at each other. The irony of their situation never failed to amuse her, even in the darkest moments. While the galaxy's greatest powers dismissed Earth as a collection of warring tribes who had barely discovered nuclear fission, humanity had been quietly building a technological revolution that would reshape interstellar civilization. The masquerade had been perfect, too perfect perhaps. For 50 years, Earth had maintained the facade of primitive development while secretly intercepting alien communications, reverse engineering crashed probes, and building a network of hidden facilities that spanned the entire solar system. Every major government on Earth contributed to the deception, carefully staging conflicts and technological displays that reinforced the galaxy's assumptions about human limitations. Min-ho stood and walked to the massive observation window that looked out over the underground facility's main production floor. Hundreds of technicians worked on projects that combined human ingenuity with alien science, creating hybrid technologies that often surpassed their original inspirations. The newest generation of Earth starships incorporated design elements from 17 different species but improved and refined in ways their creators had never imagined. The hegemony will be in our sector within 2 years, he said quietly. Are we ready? Gina joined him at the window, watching as the final components of humanity's secret defense fleet took shape in the vast assembly bays below. The ships are ready. The orbital platforms are in position. Our people know what they're fighting for. She paused, thinking of all the worlds that had already fallen to hegemony conquest. Entire civilizations reduced to slavery or extinction, while the Confederation watched from a safe distance, content to maintain their comfortable isolation. The question is whether the galaxy is ready for us. Min-ho nodded slowly, then moved to the global communication console. His hands hesitated for just a moment over the activation controls. Once he sent this signal, there would be no going back. Humanity's great deception would begin its final phase. "All stations, this is Central Command," he said, his voice carrying across encrypted channels to hidden facilities on every continent. "Initiate Protocol 7. It's time to accelerate the timeline." Across the globe, massive doors opened in mountain ranges and ocean floors. Installations that had remained dormant for decades came online, their energy signatures carefully masked by technology that made them invisible to galactic sensors. In lunar caves and asteroid belts, humanity's secret fleet began its final preparations. The Galaxy had made a critical error in judgment, dismissing Earth as insignificant while aggressive powers expanded unchecked. Soon they would understand the true cost of underestimating a species that had learned to hide, adapt, and prepare in silence. Humanity had been listening for 50 years. Now it was time to speak. Admiral Zexhai stood on the command bridge of his massive warship, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he studied the holographic display. The Hegemony Third Fleet spread out before him like a deadly constellation, hundreds of ships ready to bring another world under their control. His reptilian eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he reviewed the intelligence reports one final time. Earth, Sector 7G Minor, a primitive world that would fall before the day cycle ended. The inhabitants were nothing more than savages who fought, with chemical weapons and crude metal projectiles. Their most advanced spacecraft could barely reach their own moon, and they had never even attempted faster-than-light communication. It would be easier than conquering the farming colonies of Rigel 7. "Dispatch the advanced scouts," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of countless successful conquests. "Standard intimidation protocol. Sometimes these primitives surrender when they see our ships approaching. It saves us ammunition." 3 sleek Hegemony vessels peeled away from the main fleet, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could level cities. Captain Throck commanded the lead scout ship, a veteran of dozens of invasions who had learned to appreciate the efficiency of fear. He was already composing his report in his mind, another routine conquest to add to his service record. The ships engaged their hyperspace drives, folding space around them as they jumped toward the primitive solar system. The journey took only minutes, and Throck expected to spend less than an hour completing his reconnaissance. Perhaps the humans would even surrender immediately when they saw his ships. It would make the paperwork easier. But as his vessels dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, Throck felt his confidence begin to crack. His sensor officer, a young recruit on his first mission, stared at his console with growing confusion. "Sir," the recruit said, his voice uncertain, "I'm detecting energy signatures throughout the system, high-level power sources that shouldn't exist on a primitive world." Throck moved to the sensor station, his experienced eyes scanning the readings. What he saw made his blood run cold. Massive energy signatures were appearing all around them, sophisticated technology that rivaled anything in the Hegemony fleet. As he watched, dozens of defense platforms materialized throughout the solar system as their cloaking fields deactivated. "This is impossible," he whispered. The intelligence report said they were primitives. The platforms were beautiful in their deadly efficiency, sleek constructions that seemed to blend design elements from multiple galactic civilizations. They moved with fluid grace, taking up defensive positions that demonstrated tactical knowledge, far beyond what any primitive species should possess. "Sir," his communications officer called out, her voice tight with disbelief. "We're receiving a transmission. They're speaking perfect hegemonic standard." The main screen flickered to life, and a human face appeared. The alien was smaller than most species the Hegemony had encountered, with strange pale skin and dark hair. But there was something in his eyes that made Throck's mandibles click nervously. This was not the face of a primitive cowering before superior technology. This was the face of someone who had been expecting them. "Greetings, Hegemony vessels," the human said, his voice calm and professional. "I am Colonel Lee Daho of Earth Defense Command. You are trespassing in protected space. Withdraw immediately." Throck's mind raced as he tried to process what he was seeing. How did this primitive know their language? How did he know to use their military protocols? The Confederation records clearly stated that Earth had never made contact with galactic civilization. How do they know our language? He demanded of his crew. This is impossible. Check the intelligence reports again. But before anyone could respond, his tactical officer interrupted with news that made Throck's worst fears come true. Sir, our engines are not responding. Something has locked onto our ships. We're being held in place by some kind of tractor beam technology. On the screen, Lee Daeho's expression remained pleasantly professional, but there was steel in his voice when he spoke again. You have 10 seconds to comply with our withdrawal order. We would prefer to resolve this peacefully, but we are prepared for other options. Throck reached for his weapons console, desperate to salvage the situation. The Hegemony had never retreated from primitives, and he would not be the first captain to do so. But as his fingers touched the controls, nothing happened. His ship's weapon systems were offline, disabled by technology he couldn't begin to understand, sir. His engineer reported, panic creeping into his voice. All our systems are being overridden. Whatever they're using, it's more advanced than our defensive protocols. Powerful tractor beams locked onto all 3 Hegemony vessels, pulling them inexorably toward installations hidden on the far side of Earth's moon. Throck watched helplessly as his ships were drawn toward structures that appeared to be carved directly into the lunar rock, their entrances large enough to accommodate entire fleets. As his vessel disappeared into the hidden base, Throck realized that the Hegemony had made a catastrophic intelligence failure. Earth was not a primitive world of savages. It was something far more dangerous. A civilization that had learned to hide its true capabilities while watching and learning from the galaxy around them. The humans had been waiting for them, and now 3 Hegemony ships had vanished without sending so much as a distress signal back to the fleet. Admiral Zexhai paced the command deck of his flagship, his clawed feet clicking against the metal floor with increasing agitation. 3 hours had passed since his advanced scout should have reported back from the primitive world called Earth. The silence was beginning to worry him, though he would never admit it to his crew. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're approaching the target system, preparing to drop out of hyperspace. The Admiral nodded, straightening his uniform as he prepared to witness another easy conquest. The Hegemony Third Fleet consisted of over 400 warships, more than enough firepower to level entire planets. A world of primitives would surrender the moment they saw his forces approaching. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls blocking out the light of the distant sun. Zexhai expected to see his scout ships completing their mission, perhaps already in orbit around the primitive world. Instead, his tactical display remained empty, except for the blue-green planet floating peacefully in the distance. Where are our scouts? He demanded, his voice carrying a dangerous edge that made his bridge crew nervous. Before anyone could answer, the space around them began to shimmer and distort. Hundreds of objects materialized from nowhere, their cloaking fields deactivating to reveal a sight that made Zexhai's blood freeze in his veins. Ships. Hundreds of sleek, deadly ships that surrounded his fleet in a perfect tactical formation. Impossible, he whispered, staring at his tactical display as it populated with contact after contact. The vessels were unlike anything in the Confederation databases, their design incorporating elements from dozens of different species, but refined and improved beyond their original specifications. Dr. Kim Jina stood calmly on the bridge of the UES Harmony, Earth's flagship, watching the Hegemony fleet's obvious confusion through the main view screen. Around her, human officers worked at stations that blended technology from across the galaxy, their training the result of decades of secret preparation. Open a channel to their flagship, she ordered, her voice steady and professional. The main screen flickered, and Admiral Zexhai's reptilian face appeared, his features twisted in disbelief and growing rage. Behind him, Gina could see Hegemony officers frantically working at their stations, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. Admiral Zexhai, she said with a slight smile, I am Dr. Kim Jina, representing Earth's Unified Defense Council. We've been monitoring your expansion across the galaxy for decades. Your reign of terror ends here. The alien admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. "You cannot have this technology," he snarled. "Our intelligence reports clearly stated that your world was primitive. You fight with chemical weapons and crude spacecraft." "We're exactly what we wanted you to see," Captain Choi Minji interrupted, from her position at the tactical station. Her fingers danced across controls that would have impressed engineers from the most advanced civilizations. "While you were busy cataloging our supposedly primitive civilization, we were studying yours and improving on it." Zexhai's eyes widened as the implications hit him. "You've been deceiving the entire galaxy." "For 50 years, Gina confirmed. "Every crashed probe, every intercepted transmission, every piece of technology that found its way to our world became a lesson. We learned from all of you and we made your designs better." The Hegemony Admiral reached for his weapons console, but Gina was already giving orders to her fleet. "All ships, defensive pattern 7, show them what human innovation can do." The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Human ships moved with fluid precision that defied conventional tactical doctrine, their hybrid technology proving superior to the Hegemony's standardized equipment. Where alien vessels followed predictable patterns based on their species' evolutionary psychology, human commanders constantly adapted and improvised. The humans had learned from studying dozens of different alien military strategies, then combined them into something entirely new. Their ships could fight like the disciplined formations of the Zentaran Empire one moment, then switch to the chaotic swarm tactics of the Vegan raiders the next. The Hegemony fleet, trained to counter known threats, found themselves unable to predict or respond to humanity's constantly changing approach. Captain Choi Minji coordinated the fleet's movements from her station, her tactical displays showing the real-time status of hundreds of engagements. "Enemy flagship is attempting to withdraw," she reported. "Should we pursue?" "Negative," Gina replied. "Disable their engines and communications. We want prisoners, not martyrs." Within 6 hours, the entire Hegemony invasion force had been captured or destroyed. The few ships that attempted to flee found their engines disabled by weapons that targeted specific system frequencies, technology that should have been impossible for a primitive species to develop. As news of the impossible victory spread through galactic communication networks carried by automated probes that the humans had allowed to escape, the Confederation found itself facing a crisis of understanding. Earth, the ignored backwater world that appeared on no one's strategic assessments, had just demonstrated technological and tactical capabilities that redefined the balance of power in their sector of the galaxy. Gina opened a channel to the Confederation's emergency council chambers on Zentara Prime, knowing that her transmission would reach them within hours. When the connection established, she looked directly into the camera with calm confidence. "This is Earth calling," she said simply. "We believe it's time we had a proper conversation." The news of Earth's impossible victory spread through Hegemony, space like wildfire, carried by the few ships that had managed to escape the battle. In command centers across dozens of worlds, Hegemony officers stared at their communication screens in disbelief. An entire invasion fleet, destroyed by primitives, who supposedly fought with sticks and stones. But humanity was far from finished. In the hidden shipyards beneath Luna's surface, Commander Yoon Hyun stood before a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels worked alongside captured Hegemony ships, their hulls repainted with Earth's blue and white colors. More importantly, many of the vessels were crewed by alien species who had suffered under Hegemony rule for decades. "Commander," called Lieutenant Song Hana from her position at the tactical station, "the Liberation Fleet is ready for deployment. All ships report green status." Hyun nodded, studying the holographic display that showed their first target. Kepler 442b, a world where the peaceful Graxian population had been enslaved to mine rare minerals for the Hegemony war machine. Intelligence reports suggested the garrison there was small, confident in their isolation and the fear they inspired in the local population. "Take us out," he ordered. "It's time to show the galaxy that the age of Hegemony terror is over." The UES Defiance, Hyun's flagship, led the mixed fleet into hyperspace. The journey to Kepler 442b took 18 hours, but for the Graxian refugees serving aboard human ships it felt like a lifetime. Many had waited decades for this moment, the chance to free their homeworld from the creatures who had destroyed their civilization. When the Liberation fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442b, the Hegemony garrison was completely unprepared. Their sensors detected the incoming ships, but the energy signatures were wrong. Some vessels registered as Hegemony designs, while others showed technology patterns that didn't match any known civilization. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Song Hana, monitoring enemy communications, "the Hegemony garrison is requesting reinforcements. They don't understand how we keep appearing in their territory without being detected." Hyun smiled grimly as he watched, the enemy scrambling to organize a defense. The Hegemony had grown comfortable in their dominance, expecting their enemies to fight according to predictable patterns. They were about to learn that humans had spent 50 years studying unconventional warfare. "Let's show them what Earth learned about asymmetric warfare," he said, giving the signal for the attack to begin. The human approach to interstellar conflict violated every established military doctrine in the galaxy. Where other species relied on overwhelming force or superior technology, humans used deception, misdirection, and constant adaptation. They struck where enemies were weakest, disappeared before reinforcements could arrive, and changed their tactics so frequently that opponents could never predict their next move. The liberation of Kepler 442b became a textbook example of human, military innovation. Instead of a direct assault on the heavily defended orbital stations, human ships appeared to retreat, drawing the Hegemony fleet away from the planet. Once the enemy was committed to pursuit, smaller human vessels that had been hidden in the asteroid belt struck the now undefended garrison bases. Within hours, the Hegemony forces found themselves cut off from their supply lines and facing a coordinated uprising by the Graxian population. The enslaved aliens had been secretly armed and organized by human advance teams, turning what should have been a simple defense into a planet-wide rebellion. "The garrison commander wants to negotiate," reported Song Hana, barely concealing her satisfaction. "Tell him to surrender unconditionally," Hyun replied. "The Graxians will decide his fate." The pattern repeated across 3 sectors as human liberation fleets struck Hegemony outposts with surgical precision. Within 3 months, 17 worlds had been freed from Hegemony control. But unlike previous galactic conflicts, the humans didn't claim these worlds as their own territory. Ambassador Young Suho arrived on each liberated world within days of its freedom, leading diplomatic teams that worked tirelessly to establish new governments. The alien populations, expecting to trade one set of conquerors for another, instead found themselves offered genuine independence and protection. "We're not here to rule you," Suho explained to the newly formed Graxian Council. "We're here to ensure you never have to bow to tyrants again." The Galactic Confederation watched humanity's expansion with growing alarm. Emergency sessions convened daily in the great halls of Zentara Prime, with representatives from dozens of species demanding answers. How had Earth achieved such rapid technological advancement? Why hadn't their intelligence networks detected this threat? More troubling was the reaction from other overlooked species across the galaxy. Worlds that had been dismissed as primitive or irrelevant were suddenly demanding representation in Confederation councils. The comfortable order of galactic civilization was crumbling as smaller species realized they no longer had to accept second-class status. Dr. Kim Jina, now serving as Earth's primary liaison to the Confederation, addressed their emergency council via secure transmission. Her image appeared on the main screen of the ancient amphitheater, and her words carried the weight of humanity's newfound power. "You ignored us for centuries while aggressive powers expanded unchecked," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We adapted to survive in a galaxy that didn't care about justice or protection for smaller civilizations. The question now is whether you'll adapt to work with us or continue clinging to a system that has clearly failed." The silence that followed her words spoke volumes about the crisis facing galactic civilization. The ancient council chambers of Zentara Prime had witnessed many historic moments over the centuries, but nothing quite like this. Representatives from over 200 species filled every available seat in the massive amphitheater. their diverse forms creating a tapestry of colors and shapes that would have been impossible just months earlier. Many of these delegates were appearing for the first time, species that had been overlooked or dismissed by the galactic powers for generations. Dr. Kim Gina stood at the central podium, her small human form dwarfed by the towering architecture around her. But her presence commanded the attention of every being in the chamber. The holographic displays behind her showed detailed plans for a new galactic charter, a framework that would reshape interstellar civilization. The old system failed, she stated simply, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. It allowed aggressive powers to expand unchecked, while dismissing developing civilizations as irrelevant. Entire species were enslaved, or destroyed while the established powers watched from comfortable distances. In the front rows, the few remaining hegemony representatives sat in sullen silence. Their once mighty empire had been dismantled in less than 6 months, their worlds liberated by a species they had considered primitive. The speed of their defeat still shocked delegates who had considered the hegemony an unstoppable force. We propose a new approach, Gina continued, gesturing to the framework displayed behind her. One that protects all species regardless of their current technology level. A galactic peacekeeping alliance that prevents future expansions like the hegemony's reign of terror. Murmurs rippled through the assembly as delegates studied the proposal. The plan was ambitious beyond anything previously attempted, calling for shared technology, joint military forces, and most revolutionary of all, equal representation for all species, regardless of their current development level. Archivist Veltar shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his 6 arms fidgeting with the datapad that contained decades of his own work. For 50 years he had classified species as primitive or advanced, irrelevant or important, based on their current technology levels. The human victory had shattered those assumptions completely. During the first recess, he approached Gina as she reviewed notes with her diplomatic team. His compound eyes showed the embarrassment that his species felt when acknowledging mistakes. Your species has taught us that our classification systems were fundamentally flawed, he said, his translator rendering his clicking speech into standard galactic. Intelligence and potential cannot be measured by current technology alone. Gina looked up from her notes, offering the archivist a gentle smile. We prefer to think of it as the galaxy learning to listen, she replied. There are probably dozens of species out there that you've underestimated over the years. Species with unique perspectives and capabilities that could benefit everyone. She gestured toward the assembly hall, where delegates from hundreds of worlds were engaged in animated discussions. Look around you, archivist. Half these species weren't even invited to council sessions before this crisis. How much knowledge and wisdom have we all lost by ignoring them? Veltar's mandibles clicked in what his species considered thoughtful agreement. The Kepler Mining Guild representatives have already proposed innovations to our energy distribution systems. The vegan agricultural cooperatives have solutions to food shortages that we never considered. The voting began on the second day, with each species casting their decision based on careful deliberation. The new charter passed by an overwhelming majority, with only a handful of the older, more established powers voting against it. Even some of those changed their votes when they realized they would be left behind by the changing galactic order. Earth was chosen as the headquarters for the new Galactic Peacekeeping Alliance, a decision that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Admiral Park Minho, who had spent decades analyzing threats from a bunker beneath the Gobi Desert, found himself appointed as the first human supreme commander of the joint military forces. I never imagined I'd be coordinating fleets from dozens of worlds, he confided to Gina, as they reviewed the organizational charts for the new alliance. 6 months ago, most of these species didn't even know we existed. That was the point, Gina replied, watching through the observation windows as construction crews from multiple species worked together to build the orbital headquarters. We had to prove ourselves before they would listen to us. The massive station taking shape outside represented everything humanity had fought to achieve. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its expanding ports, bringing delegates, supplies, and most importantly, new ideas for cooperation. Species that had never interacted before were finding common ground and shared solutions to problems that had seemed impossible to solve alone. As the weeks passed, Earth's hybrid technologies and innovative strategies began spreading throughout the galaxy. Human engineers worked alongside Zentaran physicists and Graxian miners, creating improvements that none of them could have achieved alone. The principle of combined knowledge was proving more powerful than any single species advancement. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson that would reshape civilization for generations to come. Sometimes the quiet ones were the most dangerous, not because they were hiding their strength, but because they were using their time wisely. The Hegemony's mistake hadn't been their aggression. It had been their assumption that a world keeping to itself had nothing valuable to offer. Now, as peaceful cooperation replaced the old patterns of conquest and domination, every species understood that silence didn't mean weakness. It meant someone was listening, learning, and preparing to reshape everything for the better.